Please let me know if that has to change. And you beat me to it. We're being recorded now, so I promise to be wise from here on out. So thank you, Becky. It is lovely. It is lovely to be with the Sacred Ground Circle again. It does. It feels like a long, long time. It actually hasn't been, but I think everybody knows our collective experience of time has been so different, hasn't it? These past couple of years. Wow, everything seems longer and shorter than it really is. So it's lovely to be back. I see some familiar faces. I'm tempted to do shout outs, but I will try to I'll try to resist that temptation. But I recognize a good many of you. Um, if you do not already have one with you, could you please get a pencil and paper, or if you want to use a Microsoft Word or Pages or some sort of computer document, you can do it that way. I'm guessing paper and pencil is going to be a friendlier choice for you unless you're a computer savvy. We're not going to do a huge amount of experiential, but I want to do some today because it's nice to have a balance of you guys having to listen to me talk. But there's a couple things that I would that I'll call upon you to write down. So if you just have that near you, that would be lovely. That would be a lovely thing. And as Becky indicated, if you've got questions, if stuff comes up for you, during the course of the presentation, please drop them into the chat. That would be a lovely way of getting my attention. And if I'm ignoring you for more than 5 minutes, then Becky can say, "Hey, it's time for you to pay attention." So I've got plenty of stuff. I got plenty of stuff here on deck, but we'll see how much we get to today. As Becky said, my name is Busho. I am a Zen priest, monk. I guess we kind of use those words interchangeably in Zen. Neither one works in English, but they both work in English. So I don't know. When I'm wearing the big robe and I'm performing the liturgy, I feel very much like a priest. And when I'm on a 30-day retreat all alone, then it's like, now I'm kind of feeling like a monk. But in our tradition, the vows are exactly the same. The only difference between what we would call monk in English and priest in English is, well, what are you currently doing? Like right now, what is the current thing your body is doing? Are you performing a wedding? You're probably a priest. If you're sitting cross-legged facing the wall, you probably feel like a monk. So there we go. I'm from the Twin Cities. I've lived here pretty much my whole life. And I was raised Catholic, raised in the Catholic tradition. I have a complicated relationship with my Catholic faith, but it's complicated in a friendly way. Um, and as fate would have it, I spent most of yesterday speaking at Holy Angels High School, which, if you're from the Twin Cities and you had a Catholic education, you know Holy Angels, you know Benilde St. Margaret's, you know De La Salle. And so, raised Catholic from the Twin Cities, I discovered Zen. I discovered Buddhism quite by accident, or by divine providence. And I credit, although it was indirect, I credit the Catholic tradition for introducing me to Zen, because the way I discovered Zen was that my sister, she's younger than I by 3 years, she chose to go to Catholic University, St. Ben's and St. John's. I'm seeing some nodding. A lot of you folks know those universities north of the cities here. And she ended up taking a month-long class in what they call J term, for those of you who remember, where you just take one class for a month. That's it. It's like 4 or 5 hours a day or something like that. She took a class in Zen meditation. That was taught by one of the brothers at St. John's. He obviously was a devoted Benedictine, and a monk, an actual monk. And also a Zen Buddhist. And he had been a Zen practitioner for a couple of decades, I think, when he taught that class. So there's a lot of layers there that are fascinating. And if this was a class on comparative religions, I'd be happy to unpack them. Why it is that you can be a Catholic Zen practitioner and why that works. For so many Zen practitioners, they don't leave their faith of origin. They just kind of expand their spiritual life to include the tradition of Zen. I'm saying all that to start with because I want you to know a little bit about who is talking to you today. I have deep roots, obviously, going back many generations, all the way to Germany on one side and all the way to Ireland on the other, in the good Catholic one true way. And I still feel a great affinity for that tradition. And I'm a spiritual director, as Becky said. I have been for about 15 years, and I did all of my training, all my schooling, all my reading, and all of my certification work in the traditional model of Christian, what we come to think of as Christian spiritual direction. And yet, that whole time, that I was with those dear people in the faith formation stage that we call spiritual direction, I was also attending regularly services and lectures and retreats and classes at the Minnesota Zen Center in Minneapolis, on the shores of what used to be Lake Calhoun and is now Bade-Makaska. Um, and I found an affinity for the tradition after being introduced to it, you know, through my sister all those years ago. It planted some seeds very deep in my heart. And as all of you know, even if you only know the surface level about these two traditions, they are wildly different. Holy cow, Christianity and Buddhism are really, really different beasts. And like all things, the further in we go, the more similarity we find. And I'm certainly not here to argue that those are the same thing because I don't believe that they are. But because of the accidents of fate, I have been deeply immersed in both of these things. And especially because of the Zen Buddhist emphasis on one-to-one, teacher to student. We sit down knee to knee and eye to eye. That's the way this tradition's been passed down, for 2,500 years. I started thinking, you know what that feels like to me? When I meet with my teacher, it feels a lot like spiritual direction. And they have a very different way of doing it, but when I looked really carefully, I realized not so different. Actually, not so different. So what I want to do today is just throw around some ideas. I think of this as a little bit of a sandbox. I've got a place I would like to go, and there's a few things I would love for us to try together today. But I want to think of it as a sandbox that we're in together just because I'm aware of who I'm talking to today. Anybody who would show up at 4 o'clock on a weekday to see a presentation on spiritual direction at Sacred Ground is obviously a seeker. You are obviously committed to your own spiritual life and deeply curious about the movement of spirit, right? The movement of an awakening soul in these times, especially, right? And so, because the audience today, for what I'm saying, is an experienced group, I know all of you have wrestled with all of, or at least much of what I'm going to talk about today. A lot of you may even know some of the ideas and teachings and techniques I'll offer. I'm just aware that we're kind of in this sandbox together. So instead of this going, entirely one way, which is kind of what I'm used to, talks in the Zen tradition tend to just go one way. I want this to feel a little bit more collaborative. That's why we're going to do some experiential stuff together, and I hope to get a little bit of an echo coming back to me. So, does that sound good? Is that a helpful place to start? Okay. For those of you good people who have your cameras on, I see the nodding. Okay. Well, I tell you what, let us do something really, really, really quickly here. That is, I'm going to talk very quickly about just the very, very, very broadest possible bones of the Buddhist tradition, just because I know a lot of you know this stuff, but I know some of you do not. And because what I'm going to say is going to depend on us having at least a passing relationship of some of the words I'm going to use, I'm going to spend as little time on this as possible, but I want to make sure that I don't lose anybody right out of the gate. The Buddhist tradition predates our Christian tradition by about 500 years, roughly. We don't know exactly. I'm not particularly interested in the dates. But we have in northern India a young man who is exposed to the truth of death, the truth of illness, the truth of aging, the truth of inevitable separation between him and all that he loves. And he is moved to try to understand the problem of human suffering And that young man, at some point in his life, after many years, all the versions of his life vary a little bit, so it's a myth, right? Um, all of them end with him having an awakening, waking up. Um, oh, some pretty deep insight about what human suffering is, about where it comes from, and about how we can live more skillfully in relationship to it. So we call that person the Buddha now, which means he woke up. He woke up. He was a person, and now he's a person who is awake. Now, I'm a Zen person. There are lots of expressions of Buddhism, just like lots of expressions of Christianity, of course. And in Zen, the understanding is, yeah, we have a founder. We call him the Buddha, just out of respect for the old guy. But he's in no way unique. And one of the core teachings of this tradition that I find the most moving, personally, is that the awakening that this young man experienced 2,500 years ago is not unique to him, nor was he uniquely positioned to receive it. Right? So he's a special being insofar as he happened to be the one that happened to, and he happened to spend his life teaching it. But we don't imagine that his insight or his compassion or his awakening are in any way limited to him or unique to him. So what I'm telling you is something that Buddhists have been saying for 2,500 years, which is he does not have a monopoly on this stuff. And no one gets free by relationship with him because he's been dead for a long time. We get free by relationship here because that's how he got free. Right? His relationship with his own suffering is what liberated him, just like our relationship today with our own suffering is what can liberate us. Yeah. I hope that makes sense to you. Okay. So the second thing I want to point out here, just for the sake of clarity, is the way I'm going to use two words. We tend in our culture to use the word pain and the word suffering pretty much interchangeably. They mostly mean mostly the same thing for most of us most of the time. That's cool. It makes sense to me. In this context, right, for the next hour and 15 minutes, we're going to use those two words the way that they do in the Buddhist tradition, which is we're going to make a distinction between them. We're going to say pain, and this is kind of the pithy bumper sticker you may have seen. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. That's how we're going to talk about those things. Pain is the thing that happens to your foot when you stub your toe, right? And all of us, Buddha included, would be the first to say, there's nothing I can do for you there. That just hurts, right? It just hurts. Being alive is full of those things. A lot of us are in Minnesota right now, and we all know that the wind chill outside today is about 13 below. That's called the pain of cold. We're all pretty intimate, I think, with that pain. And in my experience, no amount of meditation or spiritual insight is going to change the fact that 13 below zero is still 13 below zero. Pain. Now, suffering, and I know you all know this, and I bet you already know where I'm going to go. This is where you and I, where all of us collectively spend the majority of our time as spiritual seekers and as spiritual directors. Suffering is what human beings do in response to pain. It's what we do with it. The story we tell about it, the meaning we make, the way we resist it, the way we fight, the way we constrict, the way we resist. You know what I'm talking about. Pain is just a thing that happens. And this whole thing that we call suffering, this is where Buddhism essentially lives about 98% of the time. It really spends most of its time going, what is this? How does this come to be? And what can we do about it? Okay. Now, to me, this whole thing about relationship with suffering, it feels kind of scientific or medical in that it's about reducing human suffering, changing relationship with suffering. But it also starts, for me, to feel like spiritual practice. Because at some point, and we'll get there today, at some point, our practice, our spiritual path, stops being about how do I make the thing that hurts go away and never come back as medicine, and it starts being about how do I fall in love with it anyway. That feels like spiritual practice to me. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, I hope it becomes more clear as we're talking. But I just wanted to open by saying pain is over here. We're not going to worry about that too much. That just kind of happens. Suffering is over here. And I know, again, because of this audience, that you have a good grasp of what it is I'm talking about. But I just want to remind us this is where we're kind of going to be living. So, the other thing that I am aware of, very gratefully, even in my short time as a Zen student, I've only been playing with this tradition for about 30 years. Oh, heavens. It seems like a long time. It seems like a long time. I was so young, but at the same time, I know that's not very long. 30 years. Give me a break. 30 years. Cripes. That's not very long, right? Um, Even in the 30 years that I have been dancing with this tradition, I am aware that it has become increasingly mainstream. I'm careful when I use the word mainstream because my experience isn't necessarily that Buddhism itself has become mainstream. It's certainly become more so. Authors like Thich Nhat Hanh, teachers like Thich Nhat Hanh, Pema Chodron, the Dalai Lama, even Jack Kornfield, Joseph Goldstein, some of these names, a lot of you are like, oh, yeah, I know that. Names that wouldn't have probably been known outside of Buddhist circles 20, 30 years ago are now being read more widely by a wider audience, including Christians, including Jews, including Hindus, including atheists, including, right? But even more so, the particular stream, the particular practice, the particular step on the Eightfold Path of Buddhism called mindfulness. Oh, baby, that's really mainstream, right? All of us now know the word mindfulness. 30 years ago, none of us would have known the word mindfulness outside of a Buddhist temple. You just wouldn't have known that, right? So it's becoming more mainstream. Why is that useful for us? It's useful for us to know that, not because we have to study Buddhism now to be good spiritual directors. We don't. What's interesting to me about that movement as a spiritual director is what I am seeing, and this is anecdotal, so I can't speak on behalf of all of you. My anecdotal experience, and it's a pretty unique, I am kind of a unique animal. So the people who work with me probably seek out somebody who's a little bit of a unique animal, right? Nevertheless, I actually think this holds true. And I'm a member of SDI, and so when I talk with larger groups at Spiritual Directors International meetings, I'm hearing this more and more, that people, faith seekers, even if they are very much devoted to their one tradition and very much live within the teachings of that tradition, are more readily these days drawing from other faith traditions and other sources than they ever have before. Right? It doesn't change my Catholic identity. I still think Richard Rohr and Joan Chittister are the rock stars, but by golly, I read that book by Pema Chodron and something really happened for me. Right? And even some of our very faith-based, faith-bound spiritual teachers like Richard Rohr and Joan Chittister, I'm just picking them off the top of my Catholic pile, are readily saying, hey, you know what they do in 12-step spirituality? That reminds me of what Christ taught. Hey, do you know what Pema did over here? Do you see what Thich Nhat Hanh did over here? Do you see how that reflects and mirrors back to us the teachings of Jesus through a little bit of a different lens? What I'm saying is we're seeing this happening much, much, much more often. Wow. The second thing that's happening that I know you all know is we are pulling, as faith seekers, as spiritual practitioners, we're beginning increasingly to pull from secular language, primarily the mindfulness movement, and even perhaps more prominently from psychology. Right? I think when a lot of us were kids, there was a thing called therapy that existed over here, and there was a thing called religion, and it existed over here, and oh, mama, never the twain shall meet. I'm never going to say codependent when I'm at mass, and I'm never going to say the G word when I'm in my therapist's office. Right? Those were just completely separate worlds, and now they're not. They're still separate, but there's a lot of overlap. I'm saying all of this to you because I know you are directees and you are directors, most of you. And so I know you're seeing this in yourself, probably. You're watching yourself go, oh, yeah, you know, that book on codependency actually reminds me of the teaching of da-da-da, which connects back to how Jesus taught us to set boundaries with da-da-da. And how come the money changers don't belong here? Because this is about this and this, right? What I see happening as part of a movement in spiritual direction is the language is getting more general. It's getting a little less specific to one particular expression of a faith, right? We're using more and more psychological terms. We're using more and more what we would call universal human needs, universal human values. that leads to a more inclusive container, right? And it means that our gatherings are becoming a little bit more eclectic, right? If you've been hanging around sacred ground for a while, you know, wow, the demographic is roughly the same, but I'm noticing the age starts to change, or I'm noticing, oh, I'm sitting next to somebody who's of a different tradition than I am. We're noticing that, right? And if you're an SDI member, you really see that. So that's relevant. That's relevant to our conversation because my job isn't to convert you to Zen Buddhism. I don't have a hill to die on there at all. I don't think Zen's any better than any other thing. I think it's just a different language. But I do think that dipping into other traditions can show us a lot about ourselves. So before we do our first experiential, I want to go on record. I want to do a shout out to the very kind people at Christos Center for Spiritual Formation in Lino Lakes. That's where I did all of my schooling and formation work, for going out of their way at the time that I did this. This is 15 years ago, to not only include a shaven-headed Zen priest, to not only include, but say, we need you here. We need you in this class. This is the direction this thing is going, right? The table of Christ is open to everybody. Further, and I think this is really important, they said, you know, a lot of folks who do a lot of spiritual direction and really live inside this kind of know, if you're a Catholic, go see a Jew for a spiritual director. If you're a Jew, God, go see a Hindu. If you're a Hindu, go see a Buddhist. Get another perspective. Make your world bigger. Play with other toys. They're not going to, you don't have to leave your tradition. We're not asking you to do anything that would challenge your identity, but we are encouraging you to include and expand and include and expand. And that to me just felt beautiful. I mean, we can say progressive because it is progressive, but I mean spiritually. That to me feels like this is how we keep the soil rich, right? You just don't grow the same crop in the same soil year after year. A good farmer knows you mix it up, you mix it up, you mix it up. This year the field belongs to peas, and next year that field belongs to corn, and that's how we keep this thing alive. So I'm grateful to them for not only including me, but encouraging me. Yes, please bring some of the stuff that Zen has taught you into this house, and please bring what you're learning here into your Zen house. And I have aspired to do exactly that. Okay. Are we ready for a breath and a gear shift? I'll take your silence to be an enthusiastic yes. I'll take your silence to be an enthusiastic yes. Okay. What I would love for all of you to do with that big piece of paper and that wonderful pencil that you have in front of you is I would love for all of you to draw 4 consecutive circles on that piece. I'm going to show you the one that can you, Becky, can you allow me to do a screen share? Can you empower me to do that? If you can't, it's okay, but I did a lovely little drawing. I thought, oh, I'll share that with these people if you can let me do that.
Is it saying you can't?
Yeah, host disabled participant screen sharing. I think it's the default setting. I think you have to make me a co-host. And I'm guessing you click on my picture in order to do that?
Here we go. Is it now allowable?
Let's see. Aha! Thank you very much.
After many bad things with Zoom, I figured out some stuff.
I want to do it this way. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it that way. Okay, how about this? Let's see if we get this to work. Watching 2 spiritual directors wrestle with technology. This could be like a comedy show. People could tune in and watch. Okay, are you all seeing that? Are you all seeing that? Okay, these are my 4 circles. I'm so proud of them because I did them with Microsoft Word, and I had to trace my finger on the trackpad. And I'll tell you, folks, this is about my 10th attempt. It looks like I did it with my feet, but relatively speaking, this is as good as I can do. So what I'm hoping you can do on your piece of paper is draw 4 concentric circles. Okay. Oh, dear. Okay. Now, there's going to be a second part to this, but I'm going to tell you a story before we do that. But I'll stop my screen share. Okay. Some of you have heard this story because some of you have read this story. This story has been really, really widespread since it was first made public, especially if you're a fan of Jack Kornfield, and I'm going to guess some of you are. So I'll read it really quickly to you. This is the story, and this is true. This is a true story. This is the story of the Golden Buddha. So I'm going to quote directly from the book by Jack Kornfield. Back in 1957, a group of monks from a monastery in Thailand had to relocate a large clay Buddha from the center of their temple to a new location. The monastery was to be relocated to make room for the development of a highway through Bangkok. When the crane began to lift the giant idol, the weight of it was so tremendous that it began to crack. What's more, rain began to fall. The head monk who was concerned about damage to this sacred clay Buddha, decided to lower the statue back on the ground and cover it with a large tarp to protect it from the rain. Later that evening, that head monk went to check on his big clay Buddha. He shined his flashlight under the tarp to see if the Buddha was staying dry, and as the light reached the crack, he noticed a little gleam shining back and thought it strange. That's interesting. Why would a crack in a clay Buddha gleam? He took a closer look at this gleam of light. He wondered if there might be something underneath the clay. He went to fetch a chisel and hammer from the monastery and began to chip away. As he knocked off shards of clay, the little gleam grew brighter and brighter. Many hours of labors went by before the monk stood face to face with the extraordinary solid gold Buddha. Historians believe that several hundred years before this head monk's discovery in 1957, the Burmese army was about to invade Thailand. The Siamese, because it used to be called Siam, monks realized that their country would soon be attacked. They covered their precious golden Buddha with a covering of clay in order to keep their treasure from being looted. Unfortunately, all of the Siamese monks were slaughtered, and the well-kept secret of the golden Buddha remained intact until that fateful day in 1957. Okay. This is a true story, and what it also is, unintentionally, is an absolutely brilliant metaphor. You probably, even if you've never heard this story, you can probably already begin to see your religious or your spiritual imagination beginning to populate these images with meaning. It's easy to see, oh, this is a metaphor. I get it. I was told this story years ago by my spiritual director, who is not a Buddhist. I didn't hear this at a Zen center, because in Thailand they don't do Zen. They don't do Zen there. They do Theravadan Buddhism. It's a whole other thing. So I heard about this story through my spiritual director, an Anglican from South Africa. And she said, you need to read this story. It's a metaphor for your life. And also it's a metaphor for the 7.5 billion other living, breathing human souls on the planet with you. And the way she taught it to me was, when we are born, we are that. And all of us know this. We are gold, we are purity, we are love, we are light. We are a drop of consciousness in form. All of us know this. We are the essence. We are life itself. We are spirit. And we're spirit animating matter, aren't we? The jars of clay that the Bible speaks of. Anyone who's looked into the eyes of a newborn knows what that monk saw when he uncovered that statue. Boundarylessness, limitlessness, purity, joy, love, all the words that we use. All the words we use for that which has no name. And the brilliance of what happened as an accidental metaphor in the forests of Thailand is, we know that there is someone coming who is going to hurt this. And we know it's too big to pick up and take with us, to escape with, and so we're going to do something really, really brilliant. I'm sorry that whoever thought of this name is lost to time, because the idea we can all imagine in real life is, you have a short amount of time, you have one thing in the center of your monastery that's more precious than everything else put together, and you can't move it, and they're coming. What do you do? It's a brilliant riddle. And so brilliant was the heart and brilliant was the mind, who said, we cover it with clay and we make it look ordinary. We make it look not so special, not so valuable. We cover it. We defend it. We protect it. because it's precious beyond measure. And we understand as humans how it would probably make sense. All those people would have been killed, and the memory of having done that would be lost to time. And we fast forward hundreds of years until we have the beautiful story we have of, oh my God, there's something under the clay. Oh my God, the golden Buddha. So when all of us are done here this evening, if you are curious, and I strongly encourage you to be curious, do a Google image search for the golden Buddha in Thailand. It's about a 15-foot tall statue. It is solid gold. It's luminous. It's absolutely fantastic. And so what my teacher taught me was, this is what you did, Busho. This is what I did. This is what my parents did. This is what my children did. This is what my neighbors did. This is what every human being does. The world is, in fact, a dangerous place. It is sometimes cold. There is sometimes not enough food. There is sometimes emotional, physical, spiritual, psychological, sexual violence. Our needs are not met. The world is a dangerous place. And so all of us instinctively do what that brilliant monk did hundreds of years ago. We begin to cover ourselves in clay. We have defenses. We cover ourselves. And we do that so well, and we do it for such a long time, that at some point in our lives, we're sitting in the pew at Mass, or we're sitting on the cushion at Zen Center, and someone gives us the spiritual truth that is, you are of God. You are a spark of the divine flintstone. Your name was written in the book of life and recorded in the book of eternity thousands of years before even your parents were born. You are that. You are love. That is your destiny. That is actually what you most truly are. We think, what are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about. I never knew that, or I knew it and I long forgot, because we so identify with the clay. And so then stuff starts to move us. I'm guessing a lot of your directees are in midlife, or I'm guessing that they just had a death. I'm guessing they just had a move. I'm guessing they just had a crisis of faith. They had something that involved the ground shaking beneath them, and a crack appears. A crack appears in the clay. The thing that used to be satisfying isn't anymore. The thing that used to have meaning doesn't. Or the thing that used to be meaningless suddenly shows up as glorious. But these are people who are in times of shift, times of change, and then cracks start to appear, right? Now, as directors, we realize that's a moment of great sacredness. Oh, we're so lucky that someone has brought their cracking open heart to us to say, can you help me? And we know that our job is to shine a light in there to help them see. Hopefully, we walk together long enough that you begin to remember who you really are. And all of our traditions have words for this. All of our traditions have different metaphors that explain this, right? Our true nature as unconditional love, right? So the Golden Buddha metaphor becomes just a way of looking at the creation of the self. So I'm going to have you do now with your 4 concentric rings what my teacher had me do with mine all of those years ago. And I'm going to show you what she did. Oh, let's see here if I can find it, because I would love for all of us to do this together. Yes, here we go. Ta-da! Okay, now, can you all see that? I would love for you to label, please, your 4 rings. I would love for you to label that center one, love, or if you wish, God, or if you wish, Buddha, or if you wish, consciousness, spaciousness, boundarylessness, whatever word fits for you, that center core, that core of the self that we know is identical with the divine. It's our divine, right? And then we have a layer around that. That first ring of the tree, the first coating on the Buddha is our wounds. These are what hurt us. These are the forces that assail that Buddha. I'm just putting wounds here, but that can be trauma, that can be unmet needs, pain, shame, loss. Everybody knows what belongs there, right? That first ring, all the stuff that begins to surround that love. And then we go one more out, that next ring. I would love for you to label, these are our defenses. This is the clay. This is the clay. This is what we use to try to keep safe. We try to keep safe. Psychology has a beautiful word for that. They call it defenses. I say it's beautiful because it's so literal. This is what you're going to use to try to protect, right? This is the clay. Psychology says they all come down to fight or flight. I would agree, or fight or flight or freeze if you want to include freeze. These are the ways we try to keep those wounds from being poked, right? Very complicated. We have many, many, many of them. We see these in ourselves. We see these in our directees. And then finally, on the outside, the story doesn't go this way, but I've been to Southeast. I haven't been to Southeast Asia. I've been to Indonesia. And what you do in Indonesia is we have a persona on the outside, so we can label that fourth ring persona. This is the ego self that I want everybody to see. And I'm calling that the gold leaf. So I'll turn this off here. Bing. I'm calling that the gold leaf because what they do in some of these temples, boy, this is clever. Churches always figure out a way to make a buck, don't they? We all do it. Doesn't matter what. Yeah, inside that sacred cave there is just a clay Buddha or a wooden Buddha. It's worth nothing. But if you'd like to pay some a dollar, whatever the currency happens to be, we'll give you a little square, a 1-inch square of gold leaf, and you can go into the cave there and make your offering and say your prayer, please, light your incense. Then you can put that piece of gold leaf onto the statue. Isn't that nice? You can put your gold leaf right on that statue. Oh, there's a way that your prayer is being carried forward. Okay. And you start realizing, oh, I get it. You've got something that isn't worth anything, and you're charging me to make it worth something. It's quite a good little mechanism they got going there, right? That's our gold leaf. We all have it. I'm well dressed. I'm well spoken. I've shaven my head recently, so I look fabulous. I want you to see me as erudite. I want you to see me as learned. I want you to see me as smart. This is what psychology has a word for. They call it persona. Yeah, it's a pretty darn good word. This is the part I want you to see. What I don't want you to see is right what's underneath that. The parts of me that want to run away, the parts of me that want to fight, my greed, the stuff that Christ called sin, the places I miss the mark, the places I misunderstand. These are the things that Buddhism calls the poisons: greed, hatred, ignorance. We have those individually, we all do, and we also have them collectively. These past few years in this country, we've gotten a pretty good look, haven't we? At our collective greed, hate, ignorance, our collective sin, the places we miss the mark. We feel ashamed of these things, so we don't want them to be seen. And so we go back to polishing that outside gold leaf, right? We all do this. I understand that. Because what I understand underneath that clay, all those defenses, is the hurt. I've long since forgotten about. I keep adding to that clay because I don't want to feel it. I don't want to go back. I don't want to remember. It's really, really hard. And so in this whole model, what we can see, we've long ago forgotten, most of us, and this present company hopefully excluded, is that at the core, at the beginning, the origin, I still have within me, alive and well, my divine nature. It hasn't gone anywhere. How could it? It's never diminished. It's impossible. It's never increased. That's impossible. All those masses I went to never made me more holy. All the masses that I missed because I wanted to watch football never made me less. God doesn't work that way. Love doesn't work that way, right? My ego is very, very, very convinced that I can increase my value in this life. And my ego is very convinced that I can decrease my value in this life. And oh, I work so hard to make sure that this doesn't happen. Oh my God, I want to be good. And I want to make sure that this good. Oh, can you feel it? Of course we all know that. That's the realm of the ego. We live there all the time. It makes perfect sense. We get 1,000 messages that reinforce that idea about ourselves all the time. I understand. That's why I want you to see Gold Leaf. But I also know that this audience, this group that's together here at Sacred Ground today, also knows that is not the language of love. That's not the language of eternity. Never has been. Love doesn't work that way. If we've experienced loving someone, we know nothing you can do can increase it, nothing you can do can decrease it. It's not about those things. You might drive me crazy, but love knows nothing of evaluation, nothing of comparison. That's why we have stories like the prodigal son that go so far out of their way to illustrate you can mess up every single thing, and in God's eyes, you don't go down. There is no failure possible. So I'm getting a little off track here. The Golden Buddha model, that idea of, oh, we have concentric rings, is really helpful to me when I am working with directees. Why is it helpful for me when I'm working with directees? The reason is because when my teacher gave me this model to work with, she said, don't you dare use this with directees until you have done this work with yourself for a long time. I want you to begin to know and be very intimate with your persona, and when you're acting from there, from underneath that your defenses, and when you're acting from there, from under that your wounds, your pain, your trauma, when you're from there, and then I want you to know something else that's the most true of all at the core. But if you don't know where you are, then you don't know what part of you is talking to that directee. Oftentimes, folks, my defenses are what talk to my directees. I don't know it, but that's what happens. I get caught. I forget. My awareness goes to sleep for a few minutes and I go, oh, wait, I get it. I totally supported you making that decision because that's a decision that I made a long time ago and I wanted some reinforcement. Whoops, I didn't see it. I'm assuming all of you know some variation on what I'm talking about, right? Oh, I bet you all do. Of course you all do. So I'm offering this today as a model for the self that we get to work with ourselves and go, oh, I can see the layers of myself. I can see the layers of myself that are alive right now, and I can see how they evolved in me to try to protect that sacred center. And the more I do that with myself, the more quickly and the more readily able I am to see when I am sitting in a beautiful space with somebody with that candle lit, and I'm listening to the deepest thing that they can offer. I have a much clearer sense of what part of them is speaking to me right now. I wonder how it feels to be that part of them. Because you can imagine all four of these layers have different emotions attached to them, right? This one's really proud. This one's really ashamed. This one's really scared. Can you feel it? They're all happening at the same time. When I'm watching somebody speak to me, I'm feeling in my body what it's like to sit with them. They're telling me about the thing that they're wrestling with on their faith journey. I get a sense of what part of them is active, what part of them is talking to me, and I've got a much clearer sense of how to respond to them, right? I hope that makes sense to you. Yeah. Okay, I'm seeing some nodding. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. Isn't that story cool? I just think that golden, every time I read it, I've read that story I bet you 50 times. Every time I tell that story, I just think, oh, that is so beautiful. It's heartbreaking, right? To think that they needed to cover something that beautiful with clay in order to keep it safe, that they gave their lives to do that. That breaks my heart. And at the same time, I'm like, God, that was so brilliant. That was so, so, so brilliant. The layers of self. So we're going to do an exercise. Some of you may be familiar with. Again, some of you have seen some of this material and various things you've read. But what I want to remind you of before I show you the visual aid here, before we do this, is one of the things that's the most important about that story, this metaphor that we're working with today, that I'm encouraging you to spend time with, right? As a Buddhist approach, as a Buddhist approach to spiritual direction, is the key. One of the key parts of the story is it makes perfect sense why they forgot. They weren't stupid. They weren't bad. They weren't dumb. It makes perfect sense in the literal story why they forgot that the Buddha was there. Secondarily, and this is just as important, because we are human and we are jars of clay, right? We are collectively very naturally, very instinctively resistant, if not embarrassed, if not actually ashamed of our clay. That's how we think of it. When I see my fight defense, I feel ashamed. When I see my flight defense, I feel ashamed. In fact, I label myself as violent or I label myself as a coward. I have been taught to do that. I learned that from my church, from my family, from the movies I watched, from the schools I went to, right? I have learned to become ashamed of the thing that kept me safe. So what this story does so beautifully is it refuses to let you think the clay is a problem. Literally, you get, if the clay wasn't there, the Buddha would have been gone. They would have melted it down. You see, in a very literal sense, when you hear that story, the clay was necessary, 100%. To cover the Buddha with clay was brilliant beyond brilliant. So when we're digging into our own layers of self, and we get to those layers of ourselves that are always living in that fight, flight, jealousy, anger, frustration, hurt, shame, confusion, right? We go, right, of course. Of course. You used to be necessary. I honor every bit. It makes so much sense that you are here. But now you don't need to be here anymore. That's why the story ends the way it does, with the monk very confidently chipping away at what was no longer necessary. Even the chipping metaphor has power for us. You don't just snap your fingers and it's gone. You chip away at it your whole life, right? Not out of disdain or judgment or hate, out of love. You want to uncover what is the most true about you, right? Do you sort of see how this whole thing just expresses a basic relationship with suffering? What I'm trying to convey here is the Buddhist relationship with suffering is, if you hate it, it gets worse. If you hate it, it gets worse. If you want it to leave, it stays. That's how this stuff works. The cat came back the very next day, right? Which is why I started where I did. When I hate my pain, I create suffering. If I hate my suffering, I create more suffering. If I hate my hating of the suffering, I create even more. If I hate the hating of the suffering, we could be here all day, right? And this is normal. It's what we all do. It hurts. I want it to go away. So what I'm reminding us all of, not only are we all the golden Buddha, but we also are aware, right? I inhabit an animal body down here. We're mammals, right? Warm-blooded, warm-blooded, born from a female body. I need food, clothing, shelter. I inhabit a mammal. Yep. And I'm also a complicated human being, so I have another layer that animals do not, which is holy macaroni, self-awareness. This is complicated. Self-awareness. I happen to know that I'm going to die. Oh, I'm going to get older. I have complicated needs my cat does not. Belonging, respect, inclusion. I want to feel power and mastery. This is Homo sapiens, right? The crown jewel on this planet. We have this whole complicated thing here. Still, just like the lower, just like the mammal, pain, I'm going to go the other way. Pain, I'm going to go the other way. I want that to end. And we also have another thing. And this is why the organization called Sacred Ground exists. That first word. We also know something else, don't we? We also have another nature that isn't ego and that isn't physical. We have something up here, way up here. Psychology has a word for it. Our traditions have a word for it. This is my divine nature. This is my highest nature. This is my transcendent nature. This is my spiritual self. This is self-actualization, if you feel Jungian. This is my highest self. And here's what's interesting, is this middle self, my ego, wants to run away from pain and get rid of it, or fight with it and get rid of it. The animal always wants to run away from it, get rid of it, fight with it and get rid of it. And this part of me, the reason we're all here today, has exactly the opposite instinct. No wonder we're so confused. Because you know what love does when it sees suffering. It runs toward it as fast as it can. We all know why Christ went into the ghettos and why he went toward the people who were broken and the ones who were crying and the ones who were weeping and the ones who were dead. We know why the Buddha did what he did, why he spent his whole life teaching people who were in pain and who felt split and people who were grieving and people who were confused and people who were angry and people who were greedy. That's what love does. You hear a crying baby, you rush toward it. You don't go away from it. You know this. Everybody knows this. We forget because we've been covered in clay for a long time, but this is our nature. So we are of dual nature. This whole part of me, I'm out of here. We're going to create suffering. We want to get out. And we all have another part that goes, oh, please tell me more about that. Come closer to me so that I can hold you. I am not scared of you, anger. I am not scared of you, sadness. I am not scared of you, grief. I am not scared of you, confusion. Love is never scared of any of those things. I will hold you. I will be right with you. I will feel that with you. We call that function of love compassion. Come here, delusion, misunderstanding, lies. Come to me. I will challenge you. I will correct the thing that hurts you. I will pull that thorn out of your paw. I will tell you the truth. We call that function of love wisdom. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. We know that that's a function of love that Christ was talking about, right? In Buddhism, it's wisdom, compassion. Compassion is you'll be with that feeling. Wisdom is you're going to tell it the truth. Wisdom, compassion, right? Do you see the parallel? That story has so much to offer us. If you take nothing else away from today and all my ramblings, oh my goodness, sit with the power of that story and see how it shows up for you, where your chipping shows up, how your clay shows up, how you recognize that in yourself, how you might challenge yourself to fall in love with it, why it was necessary for you to cover your golden Buddha, how many years that took, and all the different ways you covered yourself. That's a powerful story for all of us. Please, if you take nothing else, take that. It's not mine, but take it. Okay. Okay, deep breath, everybody. Grab a sip of tea or coffee or whatever it is you drink at this time of day. Okay. Holy cow, we have a half an hour to go. Here's what we're going to do. Here is what we are going to do. I'm going to show you something that, again, I will preface by saying a lot of you may know this, some of you may not. We're going to do something called R.A.I.N. This is something that I do on myself, just like the Golden Buddha model. This is something I do a lot with Zen students, mentees in a Buddhist setting, but I also do this with a lot of spiritual directees that I have regardless of their tradition. It's a Buddhist model, but I think it's beautiful. So the model I am going to use is called R.A.I.N, R-A-I-N. Some of you know it, some of you do not. The person that I learned this from is Jack Kornfield. Kornfield spelled the way you'd expect with a K. The book that I learned this from was called The Wise Heart. I would argue it's a contemporary spiritual classic. It is written in a Buddhist voice, but you don't have to be a Buddhist to make sense of it. It is a beautiful, beautiful book. Highly recommended. Shout out to Jack. So he learned this as a monk in the Thai forest tradition of Theravadan Buddhism. I learned in the Zen tradition, so it's a little bit differently. But here's what I'm going to show you. You all seeing that one? Okay. So here's what we have. He calls it the 4 principles for mindful transformation. That's way too many syllables for me. So I'm just going to go down here where it just says R.A.I.N. It spells the word R.A.I.N, which makes it easy to memorize and easy to remember. So this is our relationship with our experience. This is our relationship with our experience. Our directees bring us, they tend, whether they know it or not, they tend to bring us their suffering. They tend to bring us a story about their suffering. And they tend to bring us a story about their suffering that they imagine needs clarity, discernment, something to do with. And so if we say, oh, well, what's alive for you? What's going on? They tend to tell us a story. Here's the thing that happened, right? This is a human describing their interface with their experience. Something happened to me, and here's the meaning I'm making of it. Here's the sense I'm making of it. Here's what I felt in response to it, right? So what we are encouraging ourselves to do internally for us first, and then eventually with clients, is R.A.I.N. We start by recognizing, I'm going to use Jack's word here, willingness to see what is really there. This is simply the acknowledging the reality of the experience. We step out of denial, which undermines our natural freedom. So it takes a certain amount of courage to do this. But this is the beginning of moving away from delusion. So this is simply just recognizing, oh, this is the name for the thing that's happening. It's the most tentative first step, but it's beginning, as you can see, we're beginning the process of moving past our defenses, just recognizing what is there. I'll use an example from my own life as we do this so you have something a little more particular here to hold your hat on, right? I was heading out to Aslan Institute where I work. It's a mental health clinic, and I have an office there that I use for seeing directees. And I was on my way, and on the On the side of the freeway was an accident, I guess, but I didn't see the accident. All I saw was a long, long, long line of cars that were suddenly not moving. And so I got very frustrated. Arr! Because I've got a place to go, I've got a thing to do, and I've got to get back in a pretty short amount of time. So I didn't see the traffic jam coming. Arr! I am frustrated. That's going to be my example today. I recognize the R for me is, oh, I recognize the circumstance I am in. I'm in a traffic jam. I cannot change it, and I am experiencing frustration. Do you see? I'm just naming it. That's all that's happening. Do you see? It's just facts. This isn't interpretation. This isn't meaning. This isn't narrative. This isn't storytelling. This is just, I'm in a traffic jam, and I'm feeling frustrated. R, I recognize the reality of my experience. Okay. A, now we're getting a little deeper. This is where spiritual texts spend a lot of their time. They love the word acceptance. I'm an old 12-stepper from way back, and in the 12 steps, we spend a lot of time on the magic A word, acceptance, relaxing and opening to the actual facts of our situation, shifting away from any remaining resistance or aversion, embracing trouble, a conscious willingness to include whatever is before us. This is the practice of this too. Can I include this too? I'll include this too. Respecting the reality of our lives, relating differently to our experience involves learning to allow it to just be as it is without making judgments about it, without trying to make it different. That is hugely important. This kind of attitude, the attitude of acceptance, allows us to be kinder to ourselves, and it also allows us to develop more wisdom as we learn to see what, if anything, does need to change. God grant me, you all know that one, right? We learn to extend the calmer and more stable place internally that we have previously connected with in our meditation practice. So the way I like to think of acceptance is I am lowering my defenses all the way. There isn't a part of me saying, no, I want it to be different. His wording here is perfect. Allow it to be just as it is, not needing to make it any different, embracing trouble. Easy to talk about. All of us know this is easy to talk about. And all of us know, because I know you have done acceptance practice, all of you, very difficult. Right? It's simple. It is not a complicated practice. It is a simple practice. But it is very challenging to really say, yep, I accept this. It feels like an out breath to me. I accept. Right? If you remember the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wisely taught for many, many, many decades, this was the final one. This is the place you wanted people to get in their relationship with grief. The fifth step was accept. I accept. Do you feel it? We can call this surrender, divine allowing. This is the ego's submission to the soul. A lot of ways we talk about this, but acceptance is a really, really big deal. Okay. But remember, this is Buddhism, so we are not done yet because we have some more to learn from our suffering. So now we move into I. R-A-I-N, we need to spell rain. So I stands for investigation, inquiry. This is the internal dimension, the inside dimension, introspection. So at this point in my traffic jam, I am now not paying any more attention to the traffic jam. This is me going, okay, Busho, you get it. You recognize traffic jam and frustration. You have now fully accepted traffic jam and frustration. So now it's time to investigate. Hey, what's actually going on here? This is looking deeply, seeing deeply, he calls it. The spirit of curiosity and inquiry focused internally. We see what's activated inside of us in response to the external activating event, or if you like to use the common vernacular, we like to say the trigger. The trigger is the traffic jam, and what Busho experienced was frustration, right? And so I'm going to include my awareness of my body, my emotions, what my thoughts are doing there. Patterns and principles is another thing we don't have to worry about it today, but this is basically our habits, our defenses. So it's me noticing I'm in a traffic jam, this isn't going the way I would like it, I'm feeling frustration, so let's get close to it. Let's more than just accept. Let's actually get curious. Let's hold it. Can you kind of feel? I hope you can kind of feel the spirit here. This introspection is not done with the spirit of it's a crime scene and I want to find out who did it. This is not the kind of introspection that we do in medicine where we're looking for the cancer so we can cut it away. This is including. The I could also stand for including, introspection, inside, internal. So when he says this investigation is done with curiosity, I would go even further and say, here, I'll get rid of my little notes here. Actually, I'll give you another minute just in case. This is one of the handouts that Becky has. She's going to send it out to all of you, so you'll get it. You don't need to write it all down. The spirit of inquiry is done with at least not judging, hopefully curiosity and kindness, but ultimately, you know where this is going. We do this investigation with love. We do the investigation with love. If that lion has a thorn in its paw, we understand how it came there. Well, I accept that it's there. I accept that it's there. I recognize what a thorn looks like. I understand exactly how it got there. I also understand why you don't want me to pull it out, because I'm going to get closer to your wound. And it's going to hurt. And I know, I understand. And I also understand that what love looks like right now is me pulling that thorn out for you. Now, generally speaking, as a spiritual practitioner, I'm doing this for myself. 98% of the thorns I'm going to remove from human beings in this life are going to be from me. It would be dangerous for me to think that I can solve your suffering. It would be delusion in my tradition to say, I can solve your suffering. No, I cannot. Suffering is created from within. It can only be solved from within. That's why the R.A.I.N practice starts by going, here's what's happening out here, and I'm going to stop fighting it. That's an internal relationship. And now I'm going to look, what does this come from? So here's what I learned about myself today. I learned that on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being very minor frustration and 10 being I'm seeing red and I'm losing my noodle, in that traffic jam, because of my time frame and the fact I did not understand what was going on, I experienced a frustration of about a 5. I used some language that I probably would not have used had Grandma been sitting with me, if you get my drift. I may have actually quoted my favorite Bible verse, Jesus wept. Right? I may have also used other variations on that were slightly more creative. I'm experiencing a 5. Right? The wisest part of me knows that the circumstance that I am actually in isn't even a 1. In fact, if I look carefully at the circumstance in which I am experiencing suffering, I cannot even find pain. I can't even find pain. I'm sitting in the driver's seat of a car. You guys have sat in car seats. They're awesome. I'm perfectly comfortable. I have climate control. I have a radio if I want it. I'm sitting in a car. There is no danger. I'm not being deprived of water or oxygen or housing or shelter or respect or care. There's actually not a problem I can point to other than I am aware I wish things were different than they are. And therefore I'm experiencing some anxiety. And then I start to go, oh, what if I'm late? What'll they think of me? What if I'm late for the thing I have to be home for? What'll they think of me? Can you feel what's happening here? On a scale of 1 to 10, my actual circumstance isn't even a 1, but I'm up here at about a 5. The model that we're using right now, R.A.I.N, says all 5 of those, Busho, are inside of you. None of it's coming from outside. None of it. Not one little bit of it is coming from outside, which means, and this is the good news, not the bad news, the good news is because it's coming from within you, you get to do something about it because you cannot change that traffic jam. And if you needed that traffic jam to change in order for you to feel free, you'd be in trouble because you can't change it. But what you can change is here, and you can change your relationship with what's here. That's what I'm encouraging you to do. That's what the I is about. So I had to pay attention to my frustration and go, what's this actually about? I'm afraid that I will be late. Why would that be scary? I'm afraid they'll be angry at me. Why would that be scary? Because what if they think I'm stupid? Why would that be scary? because they'd think I'm stupid. They'd think I'm bad. So, because then you'll feel shame, Busho. Ah, there it is. There it is. Now I see it. Now I see it. I want all these cars to move because I do not want to have an emotional experience that I'm going to call shame. And I'm guessing that if I am late, I'm going to feel shame. I am therefore scared of that happening. I am therefore wanting all of this to change. There is zero pain in my life, but there are 5 points of suffering that are all coming from right here. And so what does my practice tell me to do? The N in R.A.I.N. It tells me 2 things. Nurture and non-identify. It'll be in the handout that the wonderful Becky will mail you. It stands for both of those things. Another way of saying nurture, I prefer the word compassion because it's what my tradition says. Oh, can you be with your fear? You're scared. And if you're with your fear long enough, it's going to show itself as shame. Do you sort of feel how I have an emotion sandwich here? I'm angry, frustrated, stupid cars, stupid accident, stupid world, stupid weather, stupid God, stupid, out. Underneath that anger, here's the fear. I'm so scared that I'm, right? And then underneath the fear, there's the shame that I don't want to feel. Simple 3-part sandwich, all happening in the heart of one person in a traffic jam. And when I hold that anger and go, I understand that you're angry. It makes sense. I get it. You're frustrated. You can't control this thing. I get it. Do you see what I'm doing? Completely accepting it. I understand where it's coming from. It's coming from a lot of old ideas that I have about myself, isn't it? Can you imagine that Busho thinks that if he's late, he's bad? Not one person here would think that that's true. Not one person would be so hard-hearted that they'd imagine that if I'm late, I'm a bad person. Not one of us would think that. That's a horrible thing to think. That's a cruel, terrible, irrational, wildly violent thing to think. And yet, I bet you anything that belief exists inside of you. I know I have it. Why else would I be that angry, that scared? Do you feel it? Wow. And so when I get to the N, the invitation of the Golden Buddha model is, oh, there's your defense. It's showing up as anger. You want to fight with it because you're wanting to run away. There's your flight. You're wanting to run away from this thing that you're so scared is going to happen. I bet you've had that happen a lot, haven't you? You wouldn't be scared of it if it hadn't already happened to you. You wouldn't even know to be scared of it if it hadn't already happened to you. I'm so sorry. I will sit with you while you're angry. I put my arm metaphorically around my anger and go, I will allow myself to feel it. Jack Kornfield says, where is it in your body? Where is it in your emotions? Where it is in your thoughts? Just be with it. Be curious about it. It's fine. It's totally fine. It's not you. It's what covers you. Right? That's the clay. It's okay. Just watch it do its little dance. You're not going to act from that place if you're watching it. You will act from that place if you stop watching it and you become it. Right? When we believe we're the clay, we act in a clay-like way. When we're just watching it, as all of us I know are so good at doing, right? We've got meditation practice, we have centering prayer practice, we have contemplative practice, we watch, we remember, oh, I'm the watcher, I'm consciousness, I'm the field in which all of this happens. That's beautiful human drama. That's my divine nature. The field in which the human happens. I want to fall in love with that. That's the model. Fully human, fully divine. I get what Jesus taught me. Just watch. It's okay. Do you feel how I'm lowering my defenses? I'm nurturing the anger, and then it'll show me its fear, and then I'll nurture the fear, and it'll show me its shame, and I'll just sit with it. It's just a crying child. But the N for non-identify, it's a little more complicated, but the best way of understanding it today is just to realize, oh, it's not me. This isn't me. I am the observer. And when I'm not identified with that feeling, what Jack said is true. The wisdom comes quickly. I'm so much quicker, just like the little example I'm using from my own life today. I'm so much quicker to think, oh, there's the fallacy, there's the thorn in the paw. That's what actually hurts, the idea that I'll be bad if I'm late. I get it. I get it. It's very easy for me to take that thorn out. Just like I know if I was seeing you as a directee and you went, oh, I see it. Busho, you think that if you're late, you're bad. No wonder you're angry. No wonder you're scared. That's not true. That's not true. If you're late, it means you're late. That's it. It doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean anything about you. How would you imagine that would mean something about you? What? Lots of people have been on time and been horrible. Lots of people have been late and been really loving. It means nothing about you. You'd be the first to laugh at that and kind of hit me on the head and go, come on now, you, wake up. That doesn't mean anything about you. Just the way you would comfort yourself, the way you would comfort a loved one, the way you would comfort a child when you see them laboring under a misapprehension that you know is hurting them. So what I want us to do is take this R.A.I.N with us. Please take R.A.I.N with you. The simplest application of this, and I do this with my own directees, I encourage it to do it with your own. You don't have to do the Buddhism thing. You don't even have to do R.A.I.N. What you can just say is, hey, you know what? 10 times a day, I'm going to ask myself right now, what am I feeling? Come up with a feeling word. What am I feeling right now? What am I feeling right now? And then bring love to that feeling. Whatever it is. Anything. Doesn't matter what it is. Can I bring love to that feeling? Do you feel how that's the recognition, the acceptance, the investigation, and the nurture? Boom, 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 boom. What am I feeling right now? As I'm chopping carrots, preparing my soup, I'm noticing I'm a little anxious. Oh, anxious. Can you bring love to anxiety and just go, oh, you're anxious. I see you. It's okay. I'm with you. Hello. It's okay. Can you feel it? Just like if your grandchild, your spouse, your mate, your parent, your priest, whoever it is you love the most in this universe came to you and said, oh, this is my feeling, how you'd immediately go, oh, yeah, that's fine. I love you. No matter what. They literally couldn't bring you something that you couldn't love. It's not possible. Because that's what love is, because that's who you are. I'm encouraging us to do that for ourselves. I'm encouraging us to do that for ourselves. I'm also encouraging us, by extension, to do that with the people that we meet with in direction. Because all of us are seeing people, maybe daily. I don't know how often you see your folks, but we're seeing people regularly who are actually bringing us feelings that need to be held with the reverence that they deserve. And they're also bringing us ideas and beliefs they have that are horribly wrong, that are just misunderstandings that all of us have. And our responsibility, our joy, should be to go, oh, there it is. Nope. Where'd you get that? Ha ha. What a relief it'll be to put that down. How about if you're just late? How about if that's all that happens today is you're just late and it doesn't mean anything about you? Can you feel the freedom of that? So that's how I see it. That is how I see my role as a spiritual director. I hope what you can see here is, by examination of the layers of self, by examination of the nature of suffering, we've just done a very, very surface level thing here with R.A.I.N. But what I'm hoping is that the encouragement that Buddhism offers us to please go into and toward the suffering, please go closer so that you start to see how it's created. I hope that can illuminate some of our own patterns. And I very much hope that you can see how us doing that for ourselves with discipline and devotion to free ourselves, we start to see with much greater clarity. We start to see that in our loved ones. We start to see that in our directees. So I encourage you to use this. If you have questions about how this stuff actually shows up, if there are things that I didn't get to today during this time that are fuzzy to you, drop me a line. Visit my website. I would love to have you just shoot me a note and say, hey, I've been using it this way and I've got a question about how it shows up here. Flyingcloudzen.org is my site, and there's a whole bit there on me and the stuff we do. We do practice groups for this exact same kind of thing, and we do retreats and we do sittings and all sorts of other stuff. But I'm easy to find through the website, and flyingcloudzen.org is the way to do that. And I love to be in community, as I know all of us do, with other directors and other directees, people who are asking these questions the way all of us are, fellow seekers, people who are wanting a little bit of a broader perspective on how best to show up with open hearts for a suffering world. I know I'm not alone, and I really feel that when I'm with you today. So I have a lot of gratitude. I'm going to look in the chat here and see if...
Well, I will send out the your contact information, a link to the website, and handout tomorrow. But we do have a couple minutes. Are there
Yeah.
questions about what we just learned, how to use it in our own lives, or how to use it in our practices?
Yes, let's do that, please. There are no stupid questions because I'm a Zen teacher, and it's impossible to ask a Zen teacher a stupid question. We specialize in stupid questions, so it's all good.
Fusho, I have a question.
Please.
Would you, when you were talking about the source of suffering, it seemed to all point to shame.
On an emotional level, yes.
So would you say then that shame is something that we really want to, with our directees, uncover with them?
100%.
And that? Okay.
Yep, 100%. Thank you. That's a simple and brilliant question. 100%. The reason is because what I am encouraging, what the work I am doing when I'm working with people is encouraging is actually to recognize, have them recognize that it's there.
You're having a little difficulty hearing you.
Oh, I'm not sure why.
It's a little garbled. We can hear you, but it's a little garbled.
Yeah, it's almost like you hit something and it just changed.
Okay, how about now? Is it now okay?
Much better.
Perfect.
Oh, my headphones have betrayed me.
Always something.
A brilliant and clear question. That is exactly correct. Because shame is a foundational human experience. I mean, Adam and Eve in the garden, it maps it out for us. Everybody has that at the bottom. That's just a thing. You're born into form. You get it. And so when I'm working with directees, I try to do exactly what you just said, Peter, which is have them come into more full awareness of it. Well, that sounds good. How do you do that? Recognize that it's there when it's operative. Accept that it's there and operative. The I then is understand how it came to be. They're not crazy. They're not broken. They didn't just invent it. No one would ever choose to carry around a belief about themselves. The kind of beliefs that surround the emotion of shame, right? About brokenness and badness. And it's horrible, right? But if they work their way through, oh, I recognize it's there. I understand how it came to be. It helps them accept that. And then that last step is the hot one. We encourage them little bit by little bit. Just touch it. Can you feel it for just a few breaths? Can you hold it for just a few minutes? Can you ask for somebody else's help to hold you while you hold it? It's a very uncomfortable thing to experience, shame, but we're encouraging them, please be in loving relationship with this part of yourself. Don't divorce it from you. Please don't abandon it. Please don't run away from the crying baby, right? So that is exactly correct the way you asked that question. It all ends up on an emotional level being about the recognition of the emotion of shame and how to learn to hold it, because we get good, and then recognition of the beliefs and ideas that we all have that reinforce that, and then doing the correction, right? Not true, not true, not true. Kind of like my story. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I'm going to sneak in and let Kristen ask her question.
Please. Hi.
I was just going to say I'm going to pass. I just had a comment, but maybe I'll see if I can put in a question for him. My experience has been that it takes a long time for most people to come to a place where they can or have the strength to hold some of this. But I've never done this kind of an exercise. So I'm wondering if that process can be speeded up.
Oh, what a wonderful question. Oh, God. Well, I tell you what, I wish there were. I think, honestly, it's on God's time, not ours. But that said, what I have noticed and I know this is the answer none of us want, but what I have noticed is the more of the work that I do myself on me, the larger capacity I have to see it and hold it with other people, right? I'm a great believer, I know all of us are, that there's no such thing as, oh, I've got compassion for you, but I don't have any for me. Oh, come on. No, you don't. Give me a break. That's not compassion. You have it or you don't. You have the amount that you have. Your capacity is your capacity. So the inner work that I know all of us do, that's the most direct route. It just is. We get quicker at seeing it. We get quicker at recognizing it. We get a larger container. We're less activated. The 5 that I was feeling today used to be an 8, and in a few more years, it's going to be a 3 or a 2. So, absolutely, there is progress, and it is frustratingly slow sometimes, but I remind myself that the one who is doing the work, the loving, knows nothing of time and has infinite patience, because love's never in a hurry. Love knows we have eternity. So the part of me that gets frustrated and wants it to go quicker is the part of me that needs to be held for a few minutes. Does that make sense, Kristen? It's such
Yeah.
a beautiful question. I know we all share that one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Is there one more question that needs to be asked before we call it an evening? Okay. Well, Busho is open. Contact him. Thank you for this.
You're very welcome.
This was so enlightening. Sorry for the pun, but just for our own purposes, and then how we operate in our world with directees and our families and friends. So thank you again for showing up with our community. I will be emailing information again to you tomorrow, and then 1 month from today, since March and February are always the same, we're going to have the co-director for the Bakken Center for Spirituality. She is going to join us and give a talk about resilience in these times of change and challenge. So again, these are what our directees are coming to us with, but we're human, and it's been a rough 2 years. So it is good to learn more about resiliency and how we can keep going and doing our work in the world. So thank you, many, many blessings, and I hope to see you around in person and online with the Sacred Ground community. So good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.